sister's a therapist and I tell jokes. We both want to help all kinds of folks.
Hello, and welcome to My Sister's a Therapist. My name is Virginia Jones. I'm a stand-up comedian with tens of followers. I make this show with my sister, Laura Ryan, who's a therapist.
Hello, I'm Laura Ryan. I'm a licensed marriage and family therapist and co-creator of this podcast, My Sister's a Therapist. But my main credit is sister to the juggler of jests, Virginia Jones.
Laura, I don't know if you know this, but on this show, we take turns picking a topic, researching that topic, and sharing it with the other person. So one person is well-versed in what we're going to talk about, and the other person is just a rube, just a bumpkin walking down the fairgrounds. This week, I'm the rube.
I guess that means this week, I'm the expert.
All this to say, what are we talking about this week?
Working title, Nsfw, not safe for well-being or not safe for women. I'm not sure which one. I've sent you some terms that I'd like to look at before we start our topic, because this is going to be hard to keep our Apple clean.
Right. We try to keep Apple clean so that Apple doesn't bury us in the algorithm. It might not work, but it might.
We're talking about adult content and the effect that it has on people.
Hey, listeners, this episode, while we keep it Apple clean and try not to use words that are above a PG-13 rating, this is maybe not going to be one to listen to with younger people in the room.
This was inspired by a conversation I had with a young lady this week who is in the dating world. She was really perplexed by the behaviors of this young man. And I said, this is all adult content stuff.
Right.
When she revealed that she was a pretty vanilla person, he ghosted her. I'm going to use the term corn as in on the cob, and we're going to sub that for the other word.
It's what we say on TikTok, so we're pretty used to it.
I'm going to be reading from the book Pornland, How Corn Has Hijacked Our Sexuality.
It's very high in starch, and we shouldn't have a whole lot of it.
Even doing the research for this, all this stuff kept coming up on my computer. No, I don't want to see that. Google, I don't want to see this stuff. Ew. So this is what Gail says. Pornography has become a pervasive mainstream industry shaping our cultural norms. Porn has entered the mature years. It's no longer naughty and underground. It's an upfront, in-your-face business, and as much as a part of pop culture as anything else. We're in a different phase of our pop culture. The global porn industry was estimated to be worth around $96 billion in 2006, with the U.S. market worth approximately $13 billion. Who knows what it is now? That was 2006. That was 20 years ago.
A story regarding your search for corn content. When I was at Nike, my friend was telling me very excitedly about a brand of shelving and cabinets that were lightweight, and the design was such that you didn't have to find studs in the wall to hang them. And she said, you got to check these out. They're called Stud Buddies. There is no way that I can Google Stud Buddies at work.
Our mother had a job at a furniture stripping place when we were in elementary school. And I remember kids would say, where does your mom work? And I would say strippies. And they didn't like it.
Before the internet, it was a huge percentage of book titles. There's always been pornographic content. As soon as we make a technology, someone tries to figure out how to sexualize it. I went to an exhibit in Berlin, kind of on accident, because we were there Easter weekend. It turned out that everything cultural was closed. So I went to the Museum of Sex because that was open because they don't care about Jesus. One of the things I remember was there was this little sugar bowl. It's an art object. And on the back of it, there's an image of a naked lady. Titillating images have always been a huge part of humanity and human culture. People are always interested in sexual content. With the internet, it's just become a much greater force moving the culture. According to one study, 90% of 8 to 16-year-olds had viewed pornography online.
Based on what I hear from the kids that come into my office, they are getting very early exposure to these things because it's everywhere. You do it on accident.
And all you have to do is click, yes, I am 18.
You don't even have to do that. I had a kid that I was working with years ago who mistyped a word and then saw all these women's breasts, and he was 6 years old.
Each year, over 13,000 films are released, rivaling revenues of major Hollywood studios. There are 420 million internet corn pages, 4.2 million corn websites, and 68 million daily search engine requests for corn. According to one study, 90% of 8 to 16-year-olds have viewed pornography online. Considering the standard, even the most vanilla scene today, that means there's an entire generation of young people who think schmex ends with something on a lady's face.
It's the introduction for many. I remember a young woman that I worked with in the past who, with her iPod. She was 6 years old and she accidentally went down the corn rabbit hole and ended up basically abusing herself. We had to do EMDR to reprocess all of these horrible images that she looked at herself. No other person was around. She just ended up learning a lot of things. She had a lot of weird body image stuff because that was her first exposure to any of it.
The comic I'm working with this weekend, Brooks Whelan, has an incredible joke about the end of his family's computer room. He said that there was one website he found that he liked so much, he liked to visit it a couple times a day. He wanted to save it as a bookmark, but he didn't want anybody in his family to look at it. He called it redhotchilipepperslyrics.com, and that worked because nobody wanted to click on redhotchilipepperslyrics.com.
Porn has moved from the fringes to the mainstream, shaping cultural attitudes about sexuality and relationships. It is promoted through various media channels and celebrities. Companies like Girls Gone Wild, Playboy, and Vivid Entertainment have successfully marketed porn as edgy but acceptable popular cultural content. This mainstreaming influences fashion, music videos, advertising, and other media, normalizing the objectification of women's bodies.
They have an award show. Comics host it. My friend Steph Tolive hosted it. Her act is very raunchy, so it really makes sense for her to be there, but it is legitimized as just another form of performance. Porn promotes unrealistic expectations about sex, bodies, and relationships. It portrays women as constantly sexually available and willing to engage in any act. Men are depicted as dominant and aggressive, focused solely on their own pleasure. These portrayals can shape viewers' real-world attitudes and behaviors. It's really sad and really scary, but a thing that I've run across on TikTok is college-age young women whose partners think that every woman wants to be choked, and how scary that is, untrue that is, and how they don't even consider that that might not be a thing.
And I remember in the past, a lot of young women that I worked with who were high school age were being asked to do butt stuff. When I was talking to this young woman, one thing I was saying to her was, I think the problem that we're going to keep running into is the accessibility of it. Because when I was a young woman, I remember my boyfriend in high school had a Victoria's Secret catalog in his drawer. I found out what that was for and I was grossed out by it, but that was his max exposure.
Right.
And I said, you know, this young man that you had a date with is getting basically a fire hose of information every second of every day.
Speaking specifically about the idea that the way sex is supposed to be is men degrading women. In my generation, in the 90s, part of feminism that was sold to us was a super sex positive feminism. If you're cool, you'll watch porn, you'll go to strip clubs. This is how you're going to show how cool you are. I'm not cool in that way. I've never found a piece of pornography sexy because what I've been exposed to is mostly the woman is in a very vulnerable position and she's just getting yelled at. Whatever she's doing, it's not enough.
You don't find that enticing?
If I were in that position, plucked like a chicken, no body hair for protection, and a guy was yelling at me, when I know, Laura, that I'm doing my best, I would get up and leave. I would probably go get a sandwich. I don't need the aggravation.
The pornographers did a kind of stealth attack on our culture, hijacking our sexuality and then selling it back to us, often in forms that looked very little like sex, but a lot like cruelty. In a, quote, parallel universe where love and intimacy are replaced by violence and incessant abuse of women, the majority of scenes from the top 50 rented pornographic films contain physical and verbal abuse. In fact, 90% of the scenes contained at least one aggressive act.
That's my experience. You're being at the very least verbally abused for whatever reason. That's not a turn on for me.
And when I was young, because of the situation that we were living in, I was exposed to a lot of this stuff. Really, ultimately, my introduction to sexuality was the book, The Joy of Sex, or the book, The Tantra. At the time, I thought they were a big deal, but really, they were pretty vanilla.
The dirtiest thing about The Joy of Sex was both the man and woman had hair on their genitals and the man had a beard. Stepping aside to talk about the idea that sex inherently is degrading to women, we were talking yesterday about the first AI actress who is named Tilly Norwood. Some of the first comments about her on the internet were, I'm so excited that I can watch an actress who's a virgin. Because the idea is that all sex is degrading to women. This is something that we should be enjoying together. And the idea that it's only for men and women are defiled by it is just a super wild and toxic idea. If men knew how slutty women would be if it were safe for us to be slutty, I think a lot of things would change. If you made it safe for us to engage in sex with lots of partners, I think a lot of women would go for it.
Porn is just a reflection of the culture. And when cultural norms are coming in that are saying that women are less than, this is just going to be another mirror to that. I also feel like if you want to watch an actor who's a virgin, Good Ship Lollipop was pretty good.
Also, the culture is influenced by porn.
Porn, just like AI, can't come up with its own ideas. Porn is just taking the ideas that men have about women and just replicating that over and over again.
I think if we were in this idyllic society where it would be absurd to think a woman was less than, and it would be bizarre to think that a woman was just a sexual object for the use of men, I think that the kind of porn we have today would not exist because people wouldn't even know what to do with it.
They wouldn't need it because we would just be out there having sex with each other.
So many people report that porn influences their sexual expectations and practices. Surprise, surprise. Some men pressure female partners to engage in porn-inspired acts. Women may feel inadequate compared to porn performers or pressured to conform to porn aesthetics. This can lead to decreased intimacy, unrealistic expectations, and dissatisfaction in real relationships. I do think that the appearance of many porn actresses has, through plastic surgery, become so outrageous. It's like they're a different kind of person. I feel less pressured to look like women in porn because the women in porn look like blow-up dolls.
I remember a young woman that I used to work with who had a lot of body dysmorphia because she said, I don't have implanted breasts. And they don't sit up like that because of her gross boyfriend. She'd been exposed to tons and tons of corn, and she realized that was not a standard that she met. And yeah, I think it has become overblown. Do you ever see stretch marks or anything like that in these women? Never.
I had a very uncomfortable conversation with my father when I was a young person. He was talking about his own compulsion towards pornographic images. It was Playboy. It was so vanilla compared to today.
If you want to find out more about this weird dynamic that Virginia had with our dad, you should listen to our Daddy Issues episode.
My father was explaining to me how he realized now that the women in the images weren't real, that they had been waxed and shaved, airbrushed, smoothed, and everything to create a very idealized image. That the women who were in these magazines were not women who were really walking around. He told this to me as he's really grown a lot. I'm like, okay.
Ew, Dad. Disgusting. Why are you talking to me about this crap? Circling back to the Victoria's Secret catalog, I remember reading an interview with one of the models from those catalogs, and she said, it was my favorite gig because you never had to shave or do anything. You just show up hairy because they're going to get rid of every mark on your body. They're going to remove the ingrown hairs. They're going to get rid of any hair into your pits. And they're also wearing cutlets, which are these rubber things in their bras. If I was having a bad boob day, it didn't matter because there'd be 2 cutlets and 3 bras under my swimsuit. Cindy Gallop is my personal hero. Virginia and I have been big fans of hers for a while. She is an older woman. She did a TED Talk about this and she wrote a book about it. She dates much younger men. She determined in her 50s, I think, that she wasn't going to date men her own age.
Because she said, I don't want relationships. I just want sex. And if I'm just going to have sex, why would I be with an old guy? Why would I be with some old dude? I love this about you.
So she wrote a book called Make Love, Not Corn. And she said in the book, sex is not a dirty word. It's a beautiful, glorious, essential part of the human experience. The issue is not corn. The issue is a complete absence in our society of an open, healthy, honest, truthful conversation around sex in the real world. What happens when today's total access to hardcore corn converges with our society's equal total reluctance to talk openly and honestly about sexuality?
I saw a TikTok, you're going to be surprised, but it was a TikTok with Dr. John, who's taking phone calls from people with questions about their relationships. A woman calls and says, well, my husband had a corn addiction that was so pervasive, it lost him his job. He was unable to work because he needed to look at this all the time. Riding the public transportation in Los Angeles, I would see men of all ages looking at corn on their phones on the train. As a woman, I did find it kind of perplexing because I'm like, you can't touch your pee-pee on the train.
If you're not immediately about to do stuff, why are you watching that right now?
I think it just becomes another dopamine pump for them. Right. Mark Maron used to talk about his compulsive masturbation. Mm-hmm. He realized later he was treating his anxiety with it, and he couldn't leave the house without doing it.
And I experienced that a lot with many of my male clients. I have guys who are in danger of losing their jobs because their productivity is down because they're spending 3 or 4 hours of their workday looking at ladies.
I just find that incredible that it's so normalized that men can justify, not even just for a sexy, dirty aspect, but just how do you justify being that unproductive on your workday?
Well, they don't. That's why they call me.
Right.
Something I really liked about Cindy Gallop is she made a YouTube video that she talked about in her TED Talk, and I've referenced it here. There was a lot of statistics in it. I tried to clip the things that we could actually say. So she made this primer for young men because she said that when she started dating these young men, she just found that their expectations of sexuality were really, really off the mark. And I have also had that experience. I remember when I ended a very long-term relationship and started dating men who were kind of millennial, none of them had any pubic hair, which I thought was very strange.
Really strange. You get to look like a weird alien child. And then after that, you have your Don Johnson Miami Vice stubble. This bit is called Corn Sex versus Real Sex. The difference is explained. Parentheses with food, close parentheses. Unlike adult film actresses, only 11.5% of women have had a same-sex experience. I'm in that 11.5%. And although actresses seem to always have an orgasm through P&V alone, 71% of women don't. The portion of women who've been in threesomes is less than 20%. Hey, I'm off the charts.
You really are. I think you've watched too many corns and you think that these are normal things that everyone has done. If I were talking to this young lady, I would say to her, I know that this guy told you that this is normal and everyone does it, but really very few people do. It's very difficult when someone is exposing you to all this information and telling you that it's true. It feels very invasive and creepy. This is from an article called Adolescents, Corn, and Mental Health. Understanding the dangerous effects of corn on developing minds. Pornography is linked to poor relationship skills. Adolescent corn users often lack the social, emotional skills to say no to unhealthy relationship behavior and unwanted schmecks. They rate themselves poorly at choosing trustworthy partners, communicating how they want to be treated, setting limits and realistic expectations, and actively making decisions rather than passively letting things happen to them.
I think that something that young women suffer from, and all of us suffer from, is this idea of wanting to perform perfect womanhood, to do all the things that will make men pick us. We all want to be chosen. As younger partners are exposed to more pornographic materials, that bar gets higher and higher. The expectations for you as a relationship partner and schmex partner get harder and harder to achieve. I especially don't like the talking phase, which is, as I understand it, not about talking. It's about casually dating until basically the man says, okay, we can be in a relationship. And it puts young women in this terrible position of always auditioning
and giving people emotional labor that they haven't earned.
And then the guy says yay or nay. Why do we give them this power? Why is it your decision whether I'm going to be in a relationship with you or not?
Because we've been spoon-fed since birth that if we don't get married by the time we're 25, then we're losers.
Problematic or compulsive corn use has also been shown to impact academic performance, diminish working memory, interfere with decision-making, and increase addictive behaviors. That last part makes a lot of sense to me. If you are constantly hijacking your dopamine and your doves and all of your sympathetic nervous system, it's going to be hard to find pleasure in watching a baseball game,
right,
in playing a video game, pretending that you're in a zombie apocalypse. It's going to be hard to compare to that. These developmental vulnerabilities, combined with rushes of neurochemicals during arousal and completion to pornography, result in a rewiring of the brain. While addiction is more common in young men than in young women, studies show that it can impact both. 1/3 of frequent pornography viewers admit that they watch more than they want to. That's dark. The comic I've been working with this weekend, Whelan, was talking about phone addiction. And he says, it's funny, you spend hours and hours scrolling your phone, and then you put it in your pocket for 3 seconds and you look around at everybody else scrolling their phone and go, look at them, addicted to their phone. Then you have the compulsion to touch your phone again. I totally understand the porn compulsion just vis-a-vis getting good brain chemicals, because I'm constantly searching my phone for somebody liking my videos, somebody commenting on my videos, saying something nice to me. That's all I want. And I want it all the time.
I remember when I worked in a rehab facility, I was talking with my supervisor about addiction. I was like, gosh, people are just addicted to everything. And he said, yeah, human beings are addicted to salt. We are addiction machines. That's what we are.
As the world gets harder and harder, I think that we are more prone to addiction because you're more prone to escapism. You're more prone to something to make your brain feel better. Where I live in Portland, the police pepper sprayed a guy in an inflated frog costume in his air intake. It's insane out there.
He was wearing a frog costume?
Yeah, the new thing in Portland is people go to protest the ICE facility, but they wear the inflated axolotl or frog costume. And you're watching policemen abuse these cartoon characters, and it's a tough place to be. The fact that we are collectively reaching for the things we're addicted to more and more to comfort us is not surprising at all.
No, and I think it's also that access issue. Same boyfriend. I remember when his parents were asleep, he would try to watch the HBO Skinemax after hours when it would be weird on the TV. He didn't have the channels. For a second, you could see an image maybe.
Right. And then it would be snow. Some boys claim to be able to generally visualize through the snow what was happening, looking at the Matrix.
Right. And now my son can just come in here on my laptop and watch hardcore whatever all the time.
When the access moved from desktop to phone, that's bananas.
Right. I remember hearing the story on Oprah about this young man who was 16 years old and he basically became a prostitute. Men would pay him to fly out to where they were. And I remember saying to myself, he did that because he had a desktop computer in his bedroom. I will never allow my children to have a desktop computer in their bedroom.
When it jumped from the computer into your hand, how do you escape that if you're an addict? It's always there.
And I remember an ex-partner of mine, we had a very infrequent sex life and I didn't understand why. And then one morning I woke up to go pee at 4 a.m. and I walked out and he was diddling himself in front of our desktop computer. He sort of seemed nonplussed by my discovery. And so I thought, that's a weird reaction. I went back to bed. When he left for work, I went and looked at the search history and he had been doing that every day at 4 a.m. for over a year.
That was just his me time. In the 1980s, if young men wanted to download a pornographic image, they had to do it with ASCII art, which is just the symbols from your keyboard arranged in a way to kind of make an image. And even more disturbing than boys waiting for a dot matrix printer to come out with something that looks like a boob is the idea of other grown men making the art, looking at a pornographic image and saying, well, we don't have images on the internet. I can simulate this manually, bit by bit, with this @ sign on my computer.
Maybe these folks were in prison. So here are 10 negative effects of porn on your brain, body, relationships, and society. Dozens of studies have repeatedly shown that porn consumers tend to have lower relationship satisfaction and lower relationship quality. Plus, research consistently shows that porn consumers are twice as likely to later report experiencing a divorce or breakup, even after controlling for marital happiness, sexual satisfaction, and other relevant factors. I remember talking with a friend whose husband was a coleslaw member. As Maria Bamford refers to it. What she noticed is that if he was engaging with adult content, he started treating her differently.
In fact, research indicates that porn consumers are more likely to sexually objectify and dehumanize others, more likely to express an intent to grape, more likely to victim blame survivors of SA, more likely to support violence against women, more likely to forward a sexual text without consent, and more likely to commit actual acts of sexual violence. There was a UFC fighter named War Machine who was dating a porn star. After their relationship was over, he went over to her house. She was in bed with someone else. He attacked them both. She was hospitalized from the attack. The reaction of men, fans of War Machine, after this event is something I think about all the time because they thought, one, it was framed as she was cheating on me, but even if she was, that's not a reason to hit someone. Two, they said, she's a porn actress. She deserves what she gets, as if she's a different kind of person, a lesser kind of person because she's done this kind of work. These men were crawling all over themselves to try to defend this UFC fighter who was convicted of assault and kidnapping, has been sentenced to life in prison for brutally attacking his ex-girlfriend. They were just looking for reasons to justify this awful behavior. And it was easier for them because she was a sex worker. When we're in this political environment and people are referred to as illegals or terrorists when they are peaceful protesters. Keep your ears open to that, because when someone is dehumanized, you can treat them however you want to.
According to a 2021 study, 1 in 4 young adults report believing that porn is the most helpful source to learn how to have sex. And over 79% of teens say that they use adult content to learn how to have intercourse. Another study indicated that young people often reported trying to copy what they see in the adult films in their own sexual encounters, and that the pressure to imitate porn was often an aspect of unhealthy relationships.
I think that porn can lead you to believe that just human connection is not enough. The speed with which people invent new fetishes is remarkable. I can't become sexually interested until I've watched a woman fart on a cake. I need you to be wearing a rubber horse mask. I need you to be dressed like a sexy airplane. That's one quote contribution unquote of the internet, is an explosion of new and different sexual proclivities.
I was out of the game for a really long time. And while I was out of the game, porn was just exploding. When I re-entered the dating pool, I could not believe the stuff that people were putting on their dating profiles and expectations that they were having of strangers.
I was lucky to have a friend who was in Schmeck's work when I was dating online in Los Angeles. This guy says, if I'm open-minded, I'll let him touch my feet. And she said, that's $350 and he knows that. He is trying to get someone to do sex work for free. Do not fall for it. But I think because of the programming women have, I'm trying to be a good girl so this person chooses me, and it doesn't particularly matter who the person is. That's a very worthwhile gambit to try to trick someone into doing something only for sexual gratification and for no other purpose, because he might choose me for a relationship. And the experience you've recently had with this woman who was looking for relationships and found a guy looking for a sex worker is more and more common all the time. And it's a huge gulf between what men and women expect in relationships.
The thing that I was telling her is, this life that you're leading where you're out there living your life and doing stuff and you're not spending hours a day looking at adult content, you have a different perspective than he does. And it's changing the way that they think.
Through the neuroplastic process, porn can change what we perceive as normal, warp what we find exciting, and make real intimacy seem less interesting by comparison. These changes in our expectations can have tremendous implications for how we view others and how we view relationships. Porn can normalize abuse. 95% of the time, the targets of violence and aggression in porn appear to respond either neutrally or with pleasure, sending the message that sexual aggression is normal or even desirable. And I think this is a really tricky thing. When I was in college and receiving that pressure that porn was a way for women to express themselves sexually, that I was kind of a fuddy-duddy if I wasn't pro-sexual content, I really struggle with it because on the one hand, I believe in free speech and the right of expression. But on the other hand, I just don't see that porn benefits women at all. It benefits the performers for a very, very short term. And even then, not very much. For every performer who is making a small amount of money on it, there's thousands of women trying to get through their GD day without having someone yell at them or spank in their face, that it is harming.
I think it's harming to the S workers themselves, but it's harming to everybody. It's making us more mentally ill. A number of peer-reviewed studies have found a link between adult content consumption and mental health outcomes like depression, anxiety, loneliness, lower life satisfaction, and poorer self-esteem and overall mental health. These studies have found that these links are particularly strong when adult content is used to try to escape negative emotions or cope, and also when the consumption becomes heavy and compulsive.
This industry that exists to take money out of the pockets of men is instead creating incorrect beliefs about sex, creating men who cannot connect with women, is increasing depression and mental illness. Here's a love letter that War Machine wrote to his ex-girlfriend who he nearly killed from prison. I want to be your hero. For you, I'd gladly die. You must know that my love is true indeed. And here we have the greatest mystery solved of why Christ came to die. This is a woman who he tried to kill because he was no longer with her. This conflict of men seeking love and being unable to create and maintain relationships because of their porn addiction is, for me, the saddest story of all.
We're going to read from is adult content bad for you? Why is porn bad? Adult content addiction is considered compulsive behavior and a disorder. In other words, your consumption is now out of control and you need it to function. An adult content addiction gets in the way of your work, daily responsibilities, and social life. It takes precedence over everything else. And because of the trauma that's often connected here, the unresolved trauma that's driving your usage is still here, unhealed and unaddressed. I see men with this all the time. They're so depressed. They feel so empty. It's just like the rat with the button. They just keep pushing it and it's not taking them anywhere good.
Talking about how this industry is harmful for women, I watched a documentary called Hot Girls Wanted, and it's about newly 18-year-olds being brought into pornography. Their careers are short and they're just being sexually abused on film for other people. They have no life experience. They have no ability to defend themselves or stand up for themselves. This is what's being told is normal, and they're just abused in horrific ways that are illegal because they have reached this moment in time and because they have signed a piece of paper saying, I agree to a much older man doing stuff to me on film. Then they turn 20 and then they're out of the business for the most part, and then have to go figure out their trauma and try to get a job. It just was a very clear demonstration for me of how the industry picks up young girls and chews them up and spits them out. And it'll keep going because there's always going to be more young girls.
It's like the modeling industry. You have a very short shelf life.
This says your brain can't differentiate arousal from pornography and arousal from sex with a real person. And that's why it works. That's the thing everybody likes about it. As you watch regularly, you can eventually become desensitized to sexual experiences. Real sexual activity isn't as exciting or arousing, so it can get more challenging to get or maintain an erection, leading to porn-induced ED. I think many women have experienced this. Either a man touches himself too much, touches himself looking at pornography too much, or a combination of the two, where just having good old-fashioned American pie, P in the V sex is no longer exciting. Keep in mind, men in Victorian times died to watch a woman expose her ankle while crossing the street.
My final point that I want to make is how this industry has also really fed into the incel movement. I feel like there's a huge correlation between the two. So I'm going to read from the article. I don't hate all women, just those stuck-up bees. How incels and mainstream porn speak the same extreme language of misogyny and violence against women. These two researchers, Dworkin and McKinnon, famously defined adult content as sexual subordination graphically depicted, whether in pictures or in words. Research has shown that frequent exposure to these things increase the likelihood of engagement in risky sexual behaviors, self-objectification, and endorsement of great myths.
And there's part of me that has empathy for incels because they don't want to be where they are. But if you are a young man watching content that actually stunts your ability to relate to women your own age, to engage with women your own age, then you're just going down a rabbit hole. This is what turns me on. I love that about men. They're so sweet, how they think that what turns them on has anything to do with me at all. I can't achieve completion unless you poop on your chest. Okay, well, then you're not going to. Sorry. These are young people who are in formative years developing ideas about what they want from sex, what they deserve in sex, what's quote unquote normal in sex, when they are meeting young women their age who just want to fall in love and have sex like their parents did it, they're being rejected. That's not really their fault. But then they get super angry, not at porn, not at the sexual content that's warping their minds. They get mad at girls. Why don't you want to be bent over and yelled at and made to smell this leather glove? That's what's normal.
Right. I guess I just feel like there's a pipeline between content like that and then moving into this incel way of life. The truth of the matter is many men are late bloomers and they don't meet a girl until they're much older and don't have access to women for whatever reason. In the past, they used to figure it out, try to be a better dating partner or maybe dress better or work on their social skills. But now these gentlemen, because of the internet, have all bonded together and said, we just don't want to have anything to do with women at all. So we're just going to watch these movies, treat women like trash.
The cycle of treating women like trash and being surprised that women do not like it.
It's a weird one.
It's strange. We discussed this a little bit before. Reducing women to objects in pornography is a precondition to make the violence they endure look acceptable. If you're not really a person, then I can treat you however I wish to. When women stop being people, acts of violence against them stop being harmful because objects cannot be harmed.
If you're like my settee, I can kick you whenever I feel like it.
Right. If you have a sex robot, you can harm it. I don't know if that's healthy to give people an outlet for their violent desires, because where does that energy go?
But if I had to pick between you kicking your settee and harming a woman, I'm going to go with kicking the settee, because at least the settee will not be harmed. While women become powerless in adult content as willing actors who ask to be acted upon, men become powerful and always obtain as much intercourse as they want, how they want it. For a short time, men get to see what life would look like if only women unquestionably consented to their sexual demands.
Maybe that's the real fantasy, not that this woman is going to eat a cup of human poop, but any woman will do anything that I want at any time. Maybe that's the core message. This article argues that, like pornography, incel misogyny is a speech act whose persuasive effect is to silence women, police their behavior, and ultimately harm them. The term incel stands for involuntary celibate and was created in 1993 by a female student, Alana, who on her website described incel as, quote, anybody of any gender who was lonely, had never had sex, or who hadn't had a relationship in a long time, unquote. She really hit on something there, and it's too bad she didn't make any money off of it.
I think the fact that she's a woman, first of all, is going to kind of ruin her on that. According to these gentlemen, women are just chock-a-block with sex options that are happening all the time. And it's only men who are lonely.
My friend Heather had a joke about how when she complained about being lonely, people would say, well, there's no reason to be lonely. There's men everywhere. And she said, that's like telling a person, there's no reason to be hungry. There's plenty of perfectly good sandwiches in the garbage.
The term has now been appropriated by a group of aggrieved men to exclude women and propagate misogyny. Incels have a strict social hierarchy, mostly based on appearance and wealth. While incels are at the bottom, this hierarchy includes Chads and Stacies. Chads are men who are high status, rich, muscular, and having intercourse with as many women as they want. Chads are the embodiment of the alpha male, the diametrically opposed person to incels. Stacies are attractive women who will only have intercourse with Chads. This is a quote that I read from an incel. In a sexually free society, even the ugliest, most deformed, most obese woman can get males of average attractiveness. In this system, women are the gatekeepers of sex, while incels are their victims. Did you know that obese, deformed women are out there having sex with whoever they want?
Laura, I'm living it.
I'm the poster child for that.
Hard agree. Anytime you're saying you're gatekeeping sex, that is super, super toxic. As if men are entitled to it and women are like, no, no, no. That's a super toxic idea, that what you need to be to have sex is a living man.
And as a deformed woman,
as obese, deformed women who get to have all the sex we want with average guys, the Chads and Stacies hierarchy is interesting to me just in of itself, because it reminds me a lot of how I felt in high school. There's these popular people who everybody likes, who have more money than me, who are more attractive than me, who have more friends than me, and they're going to get everything. And I'm not going to get anything because I don't have the things that they have. But then I grew up and found that those people had their own problems, that very few of them kept it together after high school. I don't really need to be jealous of anyone. Any gift that you have also comes with its own downsides. Incels are not past that because a lot of them were formed in high school. They just have this idea that they're ugly and crummy and they can't get what they want because women are mean, and won't just say, you've done nothing to deserve this, but please let us be intimate. Let me expose you to my most tender places because you're really good at playing a video game where you are shooting prostitutes.
I am actually quite good at that game.
Scholars have suggested that mainstream pornography, with its unceasing exploitation of women, encourages the acceptance and propagation of grape culture, that is, attitudes, behaviors, and norms connected with violence against women. By raising tolerance levels for aggressive sex, it blurs the line between violence and sex, and crucially, it suggests that women enjoy both. According to Jensen, 2011, pornography teaches that, quote, all women always want sex from men. Women like all sexual acts that men perform or demand, and any woman who does not at first realize this can be persuaded by force. If women were not seen as lesser than in this society, this kind of rhetoric could not exist. Can you imagine treating an equal like this? Can you imagine treating someone who you loved and respected like this? Women have to be at the bottom of the dog pile to be treated this way.
Adult content in and of itself is not the problem. It's because of the reflection of these basic ideas that we have about women.
My bigger picture is the culture is informing adult content, and then adult content is refining it. When I was a kid and I was told that people who didn't like porn were fuddy-duddies and were sexually repressed and turbo Christians, and you had to be a real square not to like it, I do feel justified in saying none of it is saying the thing that I want it to say, which is people of all genders can share whatever kind of sexual connection they wish to with each other, and that we're all free as long as we're all consenting, as long as no one is subjugating anyone. The most disturbing part of all of this is the sexualization of the humiliation and subjugation of women, and the idea that sex is harmful for women, something that women don't want, that they have to be tricked or coerced or forced into. These are all ideas that move us further away from one another.
I agree. The dehumanization of women is part and parcel of grape culture and a major feature of mainstream adult content. Arguably, the fact that I do not have the freedom to force a woman to have intercourse with me is subjugation too. That's a quote from an incel.
Hey, Bucky, cheer up.
Don't you think that I should have the freedom to force someone to have sex with me as a deformed obese?
I think a big problem in culture today is men coming to the uncomfortable realization that many of the methods that they have acquired to have sex are abuse.
Bill Cosby said we could all just give a woman a fun pill.
I did read a thing a little while ago on Reddit. There's this incel group where one of the leaders, one of the very best incels, the Anthony Michael Hall of incels, because he was king of the geeks in...
Oh, okay. I was like, wait, why are we bringing Anthony Michael Hall into this?
The king of the geeks of the incels had to step down from his position because he was in a loving relationship. And he came out to his following and said, you guys have given me so much support and you have really been there for me. I'm going to miss you, but I have to leave because I'm in this incredible relationship with this woman. The response was so interesting. Fully half of the people were like, man, congratulations. This is the dream. This is what we all want. We're really happy for you. We're going to miss you. Saying goodbye to their friend. And then half of the men are like, you're a simp, you're a sucker, she's going to cheat on you, she's going to leave you, you're going to be back. It's just wild because it's a group that none of them wanted to be a member of, but then they were vociferously defending their membership. It's just a very strange phenomenon. If it's involuntary and then someone breaks you of that, just be happy.
You're an involuntary celibate, so now you don't have to be. Why is that bad? And why don't you get to have any friends if you get a girlfriend?
If the thing that brings you all together is hating women because they won't have sex with you, and then you're having sex with a woman, you got to leave. You got to say, I'm going to dust off my shoes and hit the trail, guys. The normalization of pornography, with its presentation of men with unlimited access to women's bodies and women as constantly available sexual objects who never deny men, one assumes, dehumanizing sex. Similarly, incels understand relationships is something they deserve and need to gain from women, while these remain passive participants who owe all men, including incels, sex. If a woman is an object, she just has a purpose, and that purpose is to have sex with me and to, I guess, make my sandwich and make my doctor's appointments.
And also, I reserve the right to deny humanizing intercourse as well. It doesn't have to be dehumanizing for me to not want to do it. I remember after my marriage, I think that I've been saved from a lot of this stuff because I wasn't in the market and just the time I was born and all of that stuff. The stuff that I hear young women having to deal with now is just stuff I never even would have imagined in my wildest dreams. So after my divorce, I dated a much younger person and I started discovering that he had a lot of weird ideas and said that I needed to do stuff that I wasn't going to do. And I absolutely didn't do it. And he was mad at me about it. And he said, well, you kind of owe that to me. And I remember I went on a really long trip to Europe. We had problems with the flights and I ended up basically being in some form of transit for 16 hours and got home and he was demanding sex from me. And I was like, no, absolutely not. And he couldn't believe it. He said, well, I haven't had sex in 2 weeks. You owe me. I mean,
That's a you problem.
right. It was just bizarre. And I do feel like a lot of that has to do with the content he was watching.
A very funny young woman comic in Portland, Amani Dene, one of her signature bits is she's talking to a guy. He says to her, "We don't have to have sex if you don't want to." And she says, "I know that. Did you not know that?" I think it was a strong demonstration of the communication gap between men and women of her generation, which is very sad.
So, Virginia, what are your final thoughts on the adultification of our society?
I wish I could like pornography because I wish it was better for women. I wish that I could be a cool chick and say, yeah, I'm totally 100% down with this, but I've not ever experienced it where it was a plus for me. It's only been a minus. And I really feel for young women today and what they are faced with, and surprised at people's shock that they don't want to date or have relationships sometimes. If this is what's out there for them, why would you? If you've got strange men who don't know how to ask for consent, why is that something you want to go for?
And having really unpleasant expectations of you.
I just encourage the 3 under 30 people who listen to this podcast to stand up for yourself and set boundaries about what you are and are not comfortable with in sexual relationships. Laura, what are your final thoughts on this topic?
I have a lot of thoughts and feelings about it. It's been something that's been bugging me for years. Being dumped back into the dating pool exposed me to a world that I really, really didn't like. And everything changed so fast. And working with younger people, I hear just terrible stories all the time. I feel like we're ruining our society. The human brain was never designed for this level of information.
Information, stimulation, simulation, we're just not made for it. And it can't tell fantasy from reality. So it can't tell the divisions between what is okay for you to think about alone and what it is okay for you to expect of other real people with their own thoughts and feelings and needs. And guess what? Women are that. We do have our own thoughts and feelings and needs.
Right. This is just another spot where we dehumanize women, and we need to stop. I've seen this ruin so many young men's lives. I remember a client that I had in the past. He was a teenager, and he said that he really struggled to speak to women because when he was looking at them, all he was thinking about was what they look like without a shirt on. Because before he went to school, he'd been watching 3 hours of adult content. It just really warped the way that he thought about women.
But it's one of those problems that I don't know how to solve because I don't think the answer is to make it illegal to create this content because that's just going to go underground. And really the answer is, Laura, to create a society where women have equal rights and we are respected by everyone. And that's much harder.
I would also say, I think the easiest way to fix this is to create paywalls between us and the content. An 8-year-old doesn't have any money.
He does not have any money. He does not have a credit card. He cannot convert the check his grandma sent him for $5 into corn content.
All he can do is get some Robux. And I think as women, we just need to realize that this is all BS and we don't have to do it. I know you said all of our listeners are older. We do have some younger listeners. We have listeners who are people's aunts and moms and cousins. Talk to the younger people in your life and let them know that this is not normal. This person that I was talking to, her eyes were wide when I was saying, these are weird expectations. This was never the case when I was a young woman. No man ever asked me to do any of this stuff.
And there's still this recurrent idea that dating sites and apps are just opportunities for young men to get free sex work. The expectations of the men and the women on these apps are so far apart that I don't think they work.
And I think this is why there's such a huge division for younger generations. They're not dating each other because of this stuff, right?
Laura, where can people find you on the internet should they wish to do so?
If they'd like to work with me professionally, they can find me at lauraryan.org. If they're interested in my podcast-related content, they can find me on TikTok at I am Laura Ryan. They can also follow the show on Instagram, My Sister's a Therapist Instagram, or they can also go to our website, mysistersatherapist.com. Virginia, if somebody wants to send us a note or an idea for a show or tell us about their addictions, where would they go?
You can write us at hello@mysistersatherapist.com. If you would like to hire us for something, and we're willing to do quite a lot of things, but none of them are sex work related, you can write us at hireus@mysistersatherapist.com. Laura, now is the part of the show where you sometimes read a review or an email someone has sent us. And I should also say that we love reviews, especially if they're 5 stars. And you can make one on Apple. You can do it on Spotify. You can do it on Audible. And we will read them and we will be excited about them and we will read them on the episode and make you very famous. Do you have another one to share this week?
I have an email to share from Kat Martin, and this is very short and sweet. I made it. I'm listening to your podcast and I love it. Thank you, Kat.
Thank you, Kat. That's all we needed. And in the words of our spiritual founder that keep us going every minute of every day,
To keep us from jumping off of a bridge.
Billy Ray Valentine said, "We can make it, baby."
Me and you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.